Oh, let's go over here. These pictures I did in New York, some of my last magazine work, and this was called Jesus is my homeboy. And I saw a t-shirt that said Jesus is my homeboy. And, you know, what would the second coming look like and who would Jesus hang out with? And I just wanted to picture that. And I shot in Chinatown and Lower East Side in my studio. And yeah, this was one of the last fashion stories I ever did. And over here's the Last Supper. I just felt that the second coming, he'd be with the people that were just, you know, outsiders like he did first time he came. So they always talk about the second coming. I'm like, well, who would be his followers? Well, they'd be much like the apostles the first time around. You know, not the sort of aristocrats and rich, wealthy people, but people that were more marginalized. And this is when it started getting tougher to work for magazines because my ideas were getting a little bit harder or difficult for the magazines. They're getting very conceptual, let's put it that way. If you want to shock the art or fashion world, you know, just do something that's about Christianity or Jesus that's not blasphemous or a joke. There is something in the art world about that kind of work just being like outsider art or less intelligent maybe than other work. But I never let that stop me because I have a lot of faith and that's how I live. It's one of the early pieces of Angels, 1986. Throughout my life, there's been this, you know, this idea of heaven or the new world, and that's what I started doing, you know, coming back to in the last 15 years, you know, this idea of like paradise. This is Our Lady of the Flowers. This is a friend of mine. These are all like Hawaiian leis around her, but in many cultures, this sort of idea of like this mother-like figure, the Virgin Mary. I've always loved the woods, growing up in the woods and spending a lot of time alone in the woods. And I wound up moving west out of New York City and then even moving further west, following the sun to Hawaii. And about 17 or 18 years ago, I moved to a remote part of Hawaiian Islands and the rainforest. And I thought I was done with photography. I really thought that I had said everything I wanted to say with it. And then when I was out there, you know, just this, you know, my mom always talked about the Cathedral of Nature, and I was growing up, I was, you know, that's where, you know, God was in nature and with the trees. The last 15 years of work really was inspired by living out there in the jungle, in the rainforest. This was shot there as well, just this glowing light. And again, everything I do is a lot of analog. I think theatrically, I think to set up this scene, you know, slow shutter speed, and that we made this box out of like little lights and they just glowed and all went together. So I think analog in my brain, even though we're in a digital world, you know, for so many years I worked analog, and it's a very theatrical way of working. You know, you work with a big set and people, but out in the jungle you have to find that. You have to find the sets, and just recently I did a series of still lives of flowers out there. These sculptural flowers were from Georgia O'Keeffe. They really were inspired by these paintings she did her time in Hawaii in 1940. She was sent to Hawaii by Dole Pineapple Company to do ads for them. She was the most famous woman artist in the world. And she stayed there for 6 months and she loved it. And I didn't never knew this until I was living out there. And then I found this book, and it was Georgia O'Keeffe's Hawaii, and there was these paintings of flowers. She's one of my favorite artists when I was growing up and still is. And I never knew she went to Hawaii. And right in front of where I live, there's this rock bridge. And I actually swim underneath it, and I found out she did a painting of this. And so these photos were inspired by that. And living out there brought a whole another chapter to the images. So I've let life kind of lead me and not try to force things, whether it was staying in New York, which I really wanted to do, or moving west when it was time to do that, and then moving even further west to this island in Hawaii. I didn't know it was going to do that and inspire me. I thought I was going to be a farmer. That was a study, you know, and this whole, you know, big inspiration came after about 6 months of being there. And that's what I've been working on for the last 15 years.